At the general election, Fangam Debonair lost her seat as the Labour MP for Bristol Central. Now, that was in part because she went along with her party in not supporting a ceasefire in Gaza. She was defeated by Carla Denyer of the Greens. Debonair, though, is still defending Keir Starmer. She said this on a Channel 4 podcast about Labour's first 100 days in power.
I find it extraordinary that anybody thinks that yelling at the Labour Party is helping people in Palestine, because it is not. And it's not
empty gesture politics,
It's not helping people in Lebanon. And I find it really extraordinary that people would think it does.
It's really interesting to hear you explain that in the way as if us having a go at our own government is pointless in this situation, or as if like it doesn't go anywhere. Because I can tell you, having worked with many UN ambassadors over the last few years, that actually the UK taking a strong position and voting, actually they've abstained on lots of votes in the UN, they voted with the US, and actually banning all arms sales, especially as things have escalated, would send a really important message to the world, a really important message to Israel and Netanyahu in particular, and an important message as well to the US, who, you think very
the US
slow
is
to
take
react.
Messages from the UK?
Well, I think
the UK, the total proportion of arms sales to Israel by the UK is tiny.
Well,
it is minute.
No, it isolates the US to being like the only one of the few countries still supporting.
I think they're fairly confident being their own country.
So I remember this from when Labour were in opposition. They were saying, why are you making a deal? Why are you complaining about us? We're not even in government. What influence do we possibly have? Now they're in government and she's still saying, why would we bother to do anything about this? What influence do we have? Now, after Iran fired those rockets at Israel, Keir Starmer stood in front of two big flags and said, this is completely unacceptable. Why would he bother doing that if he thought Britain had no influence? Right? If you really think that Britain can't have any influence whatsoever in the world, then just shut down the Foreign Office, right? Just say we're going to be isolationists, right? We're going to give up our seat on the Security Council, because what's the point in having it if you don't think you have any influence on world events whatsoever? If you want to be isolationists, fine. Let's say, fine, we're a small country. We're going to be a bit more like Norway, let's say. A country that doesn't get too involved in international affairs and sort of accepts that it's not this massive player. That's not what we do as a country, right? You've got Keir Starmer standing up there sort of saying that he's going to be this really significant force. We must stand up to Iran. We must stand up to Russia. He's clearly someone who thinks Britain can be influential. But the moment it comes to Israel, he's like, oh, no, what could we possibly do? Why are you even protesting us? This has got nothing to, there's nothing we could do. Aaron, it just strikes me as incredibly, pathetic. And when we're talking about sort of a situation where, as we were talking about earlier, sort of the New York Times talking about children being intentionally murdered, essentially, sort of sniper fired to the head. And then you've got a Labour, just this completely dishonest, immature argument. It's almost sort of criminally pathetic.
Isn't it funny? If you want to influence political outcomes by giving away freebies, goodies, Taylor Swift tickets, please go ahead. Be my guests. But if you want to influence political outcomes by protest, collective action, getting organised at the local level in somewhere like, Bristol or London or Glasgow, don't you dare! How could you? That won't make a difference at all. If only people who wanted Israel to stop waging its war on Gaza and Lebanon, if only those people could afford to get Taylor Swift tickets for Fangam Debonair, maybe she'd change her tune. And your point about British influence is so spot on, Michael. The idea that we're so impotent and so powerless. We were involved this spring in stopping Iranian projectiles hitting Israel. So not the most recent attack by Iran, the one prior to that, the Royal Air Force, alongside the Americans, the French, the Jordanians, they were scrambled to stop projectiles hitting Israel. So we are involved. Oh, well, we barely sell any weapons to Israel. That's true. 99% of all hardware, military hardware that's purchased by Israel is being manufactured by German and US companies. 100% true. But we still do a heck of a lot of business with Israel. And we are America's closest ally, major ally in Europe. Britain's on the Security Council, as you said. We have nuclear weapons. I think we have a military defense budget of about $60 billion plus a year. But we can't do anything. The same politicians who talk about the special relationship and how we can influence, the US, we have special pull in Washington. The minute you say, you have special pull, can you please do this? Can you do something which might be vaguely inconvenient for you personally? Oh, we can't. I'm afraid we can't do anything. We're just little old Britain. Okay, well, we magically managed to occupy Afghanistan for decades. We invaded Iraq. We were involved in attacks on Libya, Syria. We talk about regime change all around the world. Okay, there's one thing can you get involved in? We can't, I'm afraid. We've got no power. Well, hold on. You were involved in getting rid of Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein and getting rid of the Taliban. There's one other thing. You've done all that stuff over there. There's one thing over here. Sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. That's basically people like Thangam Debonair on Gaza. Why? Because it's personally and politically inconvenient for them. And I get it. You don't like people shouting at you. I get it, right? Not nice. But like you say, Michael, children being shot in the head by snipers is also not nice. People do it because they're seeing horrific things every day, every hour, frankly, on social media. And they want it to stop. And uniquely, yes, Britain is not China. It's not the US. It's not even Russia in terms of geopolitics. But it's still a leading power. It's still got all those things we talked about, nuclear weapons, Security Council, along with France. It's a major, major European power. So of course people should be seeking to influence their politicians to shift policy on this. Of course they should be. Israel wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Britain. Israel would not exist. From the Balfour Declaration to the Mandate of Palestine being overseen by the British Empire, Israel would not exist. So the idea that we can just wash our hands of it and that we have nothing to do with it and no influence and sorry, just vote for me but don't ever come complaining. Well, people in Bristol worked that one out and they gave Thangam a good hiding. She lost by about 10,000 votes in the end.